When human beings marry, they select a day that is said to be lucky. In olden times, they consulted the stars. And some superstitious souls do the same today. The ants also select a lucky day and a lucky hour for their wedding. But they are cleverer than we. Whereas we move in the dark, they know with certainty. How they reach their decision, we do not know. They seem to have some special sense of wind and weather, and guide themselves accordingly. That the ants are preparing for their wedding and may be observed in the nest. For days before, the usual work of the regular life circle is interrupted. All of the ants are possessed by a visible restlessness. Not only are the winged males and females rushing about the nest in a high state of excitement and climbing over grass and stones, but even the workers forget their labors. They appear to be bidding farewell to those about to wed. They pat them with their feelers and fuss around, feeding them from their crops. This is the holy spring, the vir sacrum of the ants. Men too knew this sacred custom once upon a time, several thousand years ago in the Italian cities, the Sabines, Latins, and Samnites before the founding of Rome. If the city had become too crowded through overpopulation, the young folks, youths and maidens had to leave. They were sanctified to the gods, crowned with wreaths, laden with gifts, and bade goodbye. These young people betook themselves to the mountains, celebrated their bridals, and founded a daughter city and a new people, or sometimes they perished. It happens often that there are more males than females, or vice versa, in the hymeneal flight of the ants. The reason for this, doubtless, being the avoidance of inbreeding, for on the wedding day, and only on this occasion, the strong national state feeling of the ants yields to commerce with citizens of some other state. It should not be understood that the female ants yield themselves to the males of another species. They give themselves only to others of the same or an allied species, though possibly from another community. To put it in human terms, the Swede accepts a Norwegian, Englishman, German, or Dutchman as a spouse, but not a Negro or Papuan. The Chinese will select a Japanese or Korean, but not an Arab. The impatient winged ants are sometimes restrained by the workers by the main force until the happy hour arrives, and then all that have wings rise into the air. One pursues the other, usually the males in the lead. Not everyone, however, flies away freely. A few of the females are held firmly by the workers. We might almost call it imprisoned. These are the maiden ants, who could not wait for the wedding day and have lost their virginity. They must stay in the nest and work for the reproduction of their people. They have committed incest with their brothers or half-brothers, and for this reason are barred from the beautiful wedding flight. Otherwise, their lot is better than that of their more virtuous sisters.
They are spared all the dangers of the real brides, all the endless labor of the young mothers to rear their own progeny. Some unfructified females also are compelled to stay in the nest. Possibly they preserve the state wisdom of the ant people as substitute mothers for the future. Both these old maids and young mothers are treated like queens by their people thenceforth. The wedding flight goes on in the air. It is astonishing how poetic the students of ants become in this picture. All of the hatred with which they were inspired by the anthropomorphic suggestion of dear old Bram is forgotten, and suddenly they regard the ants as almost human. They think of their own wedding, of the dear wife who was once a maid, and live over that wondrous day with the ants. If they have never been married, like the learned Father Wassman, they wish that they could be ants for a day there in the heavens. Wouldn't we all like to be? On a day like this, the male means something to the female. Male and female, of one or many people, surge upward. They form into swarms. The swarms become thick clouds. All love one another. Each seizes another. Sometimes the wedding takes place in the air. Others fall to earth, to belong to each other there. 3 or 4 males catch the female, one after the other. But the bridegroom is not mangled. As among the bees, they are very tender and affectionate, almost human, cuddling and kissing each other as they embrace. The wedding swarm may cover a wide territory. Sometimes it is like a cloud, darkening the sun, or covering an entire lake, flying as high as the church steeple. Sometimes it looks like clouds of smoke. So fire companies have been called out to quench a fire in the church. Masses of ants have been swept up in the streets, and in these heaps, no less than 30 different species have been found. Other ants, other customs. Although this is the usual mode of celebrating the wedding feast among the ant people, some species avoid it altogether. Among the blood-red ants, the males of a community take flight one day before the females, and in this way they encounter females of some other swarming people, thus preventing all inbreeding. On the contrary, the Brazilian leaf cutters are as impatient as our own wood ants. The females yield themselves to the males in the nest. Other species such as the horse ants enjoy the bridal flight, but do not form in thick swarms. They fly singly upon their love quest. In those species in which one sex is wingless, there can be no bridal flight. But notably, there are no species in which both sexes are wingless. Sometimes we find mixed communities in one nest, as among the workerless ants, where inbreeding prevails. In other species, the winged creatures fly out seeking their fortune in strange nests after the great festal day or the marriage night. For some species swarm out at night. The serious labor of life begins for both sexes.
The males, brainless, without weapons or poison, incapable even of feeding themselves, soon die if they have not been devoured before that time. With most of the females, it is not much better. Only a very few of the many prospective mothers escape death and succeed in bringing forth their own people. Each one goes bravely on her way, hardly an hour after the wedding, to prepare for her arduous labors. The wings, designed only for the great day, are now of no use to her, so her first task is to rid herself of them. It is quite fascinating to watch the ants tear at their wings with their feet, bite at them with their mandibles, and rub them against stones or wood until they break off, which happens very quickly. As soon as the young mother loses her wings, the symbol of virginity and the bridal hour, she begins work. She was well fed in the warm home nest, cared for and guarded. She had never done any work, but now she takes hold, digging and working as well as the best laborer of her kind. Above all, she must prepare a refuge for the people of the future which she carries in her body. She needs a close small room for them. She digs one in the earth, under a stone, or in the bark of a tree, and stops up all openings. She labors unsparingly at this work, wears down teeth and mandibles, wears off her hair, never stopped by any obstacle, without resting a second until her work is done. For weeks and months, sometimes for nearly a year, she works in this narrow room in which she has buried herself alive. Soon she begins to lay eggs, which were fructified by the males in those minutes of the marriage. The seed which she has kept so well in her own little sack. She takes care of the eggs, as the workers used to do, licks them, cleans them. She helps the larvae spin their cocoons, and the young as they slip out. Then she feeds them. We know that fable of the pelican, the mother who hacks into her own breast to feed her young with her own blood. This story is told on many a coat of arms. But among the ants, the mother actually does feed her young from her own body. When she entered this nest, she was well fed and plump, even the muscles of the discarded wings having changed into fat. This fat she feeds to the children in the form of saliva. Cut off from the outer world, she can get no food for herself. She indeed eats some of her own eggs, but this is hardly for herself. It is only that she may give it to the larvae from her crop in the form of liquid food. She gives them also some of the eggs to devour. This tireless mother even feeds the young creatures, which have emerged from the cocoons, cleans and cares for them, until the chitin shield has hardened until they are grown. The young ants are tiny and unsightly as they appear, and all are workers, but the spirit of a national working people lives in them. They begin at once to help the mother, their queen, who is now very thin, exhausted, and weak, only a shadow of her former self. Her worst time is over, The foundations of the new state have been laid. She has accomplished the superhuman. When the queen bee flies high in the air, only the keenest, strongest lover secures her, and thus is the selection of the best ensured. But with the ants, this great struggle for survival by the one best adapted for life rests entirely upon the female. One only waged the battle upon which many hundreds and thousands of lives depend. The first care of the young worker is to make a way out of that narrow room, for it is only outside that food is to be secured for its mother and itself. The nest is enlarged, and passages are constructed. Just as the mother has fed her brood, now the brood feeds the mother.